J5Lover, your #1 Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson fan, and today I want to talk to you guys about the difference between an original Jackson 5 or Jackson's album and a reprint. But before we get started with that, let's talk about this day in Jackson 5 history. Well, on this day in Jackson 5 history, December 3rd, 1974, the Jackson 5 performed their 14th and final concert in a row at the MGM Grand Hotel after 14 straight nights of performing there and doing their cabaret act, which I love those costumes, by the way. And I just love the fact that they really branched out and had the whole family get in on the whole act. Love it. Great idea, Papa Joe. All right, so today we're going to talk about how to tell the difference between an original Jackson 5 or Jackson's album and a reprint. Shout out to Blaine Thomas. That's actually who recommended I do a video like this, and I think it was such a great idea. And if anybody else out there has, some kind of cool or interesting idea for a video, let me know down in my comments section, and if I love it, I will definitely do a video on it in the future. All right, so how do you tell the difference between an original and a reprint? There's kind of a lot to look for, like if you're going to your local record store or if you're shopping online or at a flea market or something. I'm going to give you a lot of examples here, so try to keep up with me. All right, first example. I have here the original Jackson 5 ABC album. So that's the front and that's the back. Okay, but I also have this reprint. And they look practically identical. There's really only one difference. If you look at the bottom of this reprint, it says when it was originally printed back in 1970. And the original doesn't have those two white barcodes. They tended to put that there when this reprint came out, which was in 1981. They tended to do that. They would let you know in these little white bars when it was originally released. So if you see that, you've got a reprint. If you don't see it, you have an original. That's definitely one way to tell the difference. Also, there's a lot of albums that came out that had like two covers. For instance, the Michael Jackson Ben album, when it first was printed, it came out like this with the rats on the cover. But it was quickly kind of reprinted and it came out like this, the plain cover. I mean, these both came out in 1972, but this is the rarer and harder cover to find of Michael Jackson's Ben because it wasn't on the shelves very long, whereas this is a little bit more common to find. And the same actually goes for the Jackson's Victory album, which came out in 1984. This is actually a very common Victory album cover. But if you have a rare Victory album cover, which I thought I used to have, but I can't seem to find anymore. If you have a rare one, right here, Randy will have a dove on his shoulder. That is a rare copy of the Jacksons' Victory album. And the reason for that was the Jacksons would release doves at the end of every concert, at least in the beginning of the Victory tour, but they couldn't afford to keep doing that. And so those albums were pulled and this album was replaced without the dove on Randy's shoulder. When the Jackson 5 left Motown Records in 1975, they technically had a contract with Motown until 1976. So interestingly enough, when the Jackson 5 had started to become the Jacksons and doing records at CBS Records in 1976, Motown started publishing a slew of new records, just still trying to market off of the Jackson 5 name. So they published a lot of records that had like unreleased material or a lot of the Jackson 5's greatest hits. Here's an example, the Joyful Jukebox Music record, which is a very rare Jackson 5 record, and it's one of the rarest, actually. This is an original. It was published back in 1976. And the way that I know that it is original is, well, A, the date, which is usually at the bottom of most records, is 1976. And also on the reprints, which this album was reprinted back in 1984, there was a bubble right here to tell you some of the songs that were included on the album. And I noticed Motown did that a lot with certain records of the Jackson 5 or Jacksons. Like later on, they would, like in 1984, reprint them and put like a bubble right here of certain key songs on the record, which I find interesting. So if you have this, and it's got a bubble in the corner, it's a 1984 print. But if there's no bubble in the corner, 1976. Motown printed a lot of records that were just like greatest hits records and unreleased tracks, you know. Some of them were like this, Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, you know, ABC Love You Save, a lot of their greatest hits. This 1976 is when the Jackson 5 anthology came out. Motown was really just trying to market off these songs and still make money off the name. And this is like a 3-album record. And then Motown in the early 80s came out with albums like this, Farewell My Summer Love, which had previously unreleased tracks from the early 70s of Michael Jackson, but they put it to new music and kind of did a whole new twist on it. So you had albums like this. And of course, Motown was marketing off of the success of Thriller at this point in the early 80s. You had albums like this, more previously unreleased tracks. That time period between 1976 and 1985, there were a slew of Motown records that came out with unreleased tracks and greatest hits. So, you know, of course, by the 80s, Motown was trying to still market off of Michael's success because Thriller had came out in 1982, and were really trying to get the most that they could through sales out of the Michael Jackson name. Okay, so moving on to more recently released albums. Back in 2019, there was a slew of Jackson 5 albums that were re-released, mostly from 1973 to 1975. And I'll show you some examples. Here is the 1973 reprint of the Jackson 5 in Japan. So this was only previously released in Japan. So in 2019, they reprinted it. And a lot of these 2019 prints, of course, they reprinted the original inserts, which I think is really cool. But also, they all came with colored discs. This one is purple. I love the purple disc, but you know, obviously if you have an original, you're going to pay a lot of money for it. And the albums are just black. They're not purple or any color at all. So yeah, I noticed the pattern with that of the 2019 reprints. They're all different colors. Here's another one, Moving Violation. This is an original Moving Violation record, you know, hence the black record, but the reprint is actually sort of a yellow color. So that's one way to tell that it's not a reprint. The album is black. Also, what's interesting to note is this album came out in 1975 and there are no barcodes. That's definitely something you should take note of when you're trying to look for an original album. Before 1979, no albums had barcodes on them. So if your album has a barcode on it and it was an album that came out before 1979, most likely it's a reprint. You should not see a barcode on a pre-1979 album, ever. So like I said, this is an original. Also, Get It Together. This is also an original. No barcode, which you can see. This is the 1973 album. And the original album had this kind of cutout, which I love. This is one of my favorite albums. Like, this cover is just hot. Actually, what am I saying? We match. I am twinning with this record today. I love this. So in 1984, they actually reprinted the Get It Together album, and there's a little bubble in the corner that talks about some of the key songs on the album, Hum and Dance and some other things. And this is filled in on the 1984 version. Only the original will have this cutout. Now, I believe maybe the 2019 does have the cutout, but the record is actually a red color on the inside. So that's how you know that it's a reprint. And of course, like I said, there's barcodes. So if it was printed after 1979, usually the cover or somewhere on the cover, there will be a barcode. And last but not least, the Jackson 5's greatest hits. I find this album interesting. It originally came out in 1971. This is not a 1971 reprint. This is from 1981. And how I know that is because there's that white bar at the top that talks about when it was originally released. But this album has been re-released again. In 2019 it was re-released. The LP looks clear on the inside. It's a clear album, which is really cool. But I like this. I personally love to collect originals. Harder and harder to find, I notice. When you go to the record store and online, the prices are going up too for a lot of the originals. Sometimes it's just nice to have the reprints, just to have that same vibe or feel of the original records, or sometimes there's additional songs or posters or pictures in the reprints. So definitely can't discredit any of the reprints. I think they did a really awesome job reprinting those 1970s Jackson 5 albums from 1973 to 75. I would love also to see like reprints of the 1970 to 1972 Jackson 5 albums, maybe with new posters or something. That would be cool as well. Hope that answers your question, Blaine Thomas. Thank you so much for asking the question. I think it's a great question, and a lot of collectors out there, especially if they're new and starting out, want to know, how to tell the difference between an original and a reprint. And some of these albums have been reprinted 2 and 3 and 4 times. So it's nice to know like which version you have. All right, thank you guys so much for watching today. And if you liked today's video, please like and subscribe, and comment down below what you thought, or if you have any other video suggestions. And also message me on Instagram, and my link for Instagram will be in the description box below if you also want to talk to me about some ideas for future videos. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.